You find yourself in Vermont. You find yourself in New Hampshire. You find yourself in West Virginia. What the hell are you doing over there? We have to be intentional if we want to solve the problem for African Americans. You have to move with intention and mass to states within the country that has the potential to build up an African American majority. Places like Maryland, the state of Maryland, the state of Virginia, the state of Georgia, the state of South Carolina, the state of North Carolina, Mississippi, the state that has almost 40, if not 30% to 40% of African Americans. Move to those states and build up a majority, a super majority, that you can take control of the political economic dispensations of those states, like Maryland is exercising it today. If you go to Maryland, you realize that black folk control the state. They have enormous political power in the state. And political power, we all know, translate to economic power, because that is where the contracts come from. That is where the government tenders come from. That is where rules and regulations are made. So black folk have to be intentional. And I've said it over and over and over. Why you are doing that as black folk in America? By identifying states where you can build up a majority to take control of the political dispensation at the state level, at the county level, at the city level. We have to replicate 10 or 15 more Marylands in the East Coast. That's what we got to do. Because at the rate where the political divergency is happening in the country, and we keep losing elections because we are expecting one demographic to vote for us, knowing fully well that we are the most hated demographic in America and, in fact, in the world. Why are we still depending on coalitions that are not guaranteed to work with us because of their acute racism, malady? We should be working as black folk internally and internationally to build these coalitions where we depend upon ourselves economically, culturally, politically. That is why the greater African diaspora come into play. Because when you build majority in these states, you now can build transatlantic economic partnership with the largest and the richest natural and human resources continent on the planet, which is Africa. Those states that are being controlled by African Americans can build direct economic state level to African governments and build a powerful machine. For example, let me give an example. Say the state of Maryland, if I was to be in the position to advise Governor Westmore, I would tell Governor Westmore, the state of Maryland, and the state of Maryland has an overwhelming population of African Americans who are very wealthy. The state of Maryland, under the Governor Westmore, can create a state sovereign wealth fund, or a state wealth fund, sovereign fund, a state sovereign fund. And that state sovereign fund is to create industries in Maryland using natural resources from Africa. An African American businessman in Maryland can go to the state and get a license to produce lithium battery, right? For electric cars. The government of Maryland can guarantee the African American a loan to build a factory in Upper Marlboro or in Southern Maryland or in La Plata or in Bowie or in Baltimore. Then the state of Maryland can work with the government of any of these African countries like Congo to give them the right to import lithium from Africa. Now, African Americans can start creating industries and jobs using the state power in states like Maryland, where they control, to build electric cars or batteries for electric cars. That's critical infrastructure businesses to control a segment of the economy. Are you guys following what I'm saying here? If I was to advise the only black governor in America, Governor Westmore of Maryland, these are some of the things I'm going to tell him. Create a state, Maryland State Sovereign Fund. Identify African-American business people. Put them together to create a tire factory for cars. You go to Nigeria, it's a big producer of rubber. You go to Cameroon, it's a big producer of rubber. One of the largest producers of rubber is Liberia, Sierra Leone, Ghana, right? Now, these African-American business people, they can get a loan from the Maryland State Sovereign Wealth Fund to establish a tire company, Maryland Tire Manufacturing Company, private company with government loans, because that's how all these big companies they do in America. The state can finance it. Then now the state can work with corporations or governments in Africa. My corporation can do that. I can actually broker that with African governments, and they will supply the rubber to this company owned by African American business people in Maryland. And now the African Americans will start manufacturing tire with rubber from Africa. Then that tire now will be sold across the United States. You are building critical infrastructure businesses in America, connecting it with the continent. That is strategic way of building a global African commonwealth. You follow? So gone are the days where we should be begging for jobs from European Americans. And definitely we should not be relying on Latinos to form a black and brown coalition in order for us to succeed politically either. That is a failed strategy, because the vast majority of Latinos who are non-African Latinos will never stand together with African Americans. Don't fool yourself. That is why Jasmine Crockett lost this election in Texas. And we don't forget, there was a black person who also ran against Ted Cruz in Texas, Carl Allwright. He lost because of Latinos voting for Ted Cruz, because Ted Cruz has a Cruz name, Latino. But Ted Cruz is not a Teano. Ted Cruz is not Inca. Ted Cruz is not Azteca. Ted Cruz is Spaniard. He's from Spain, from Europe. He's an Esconquistador descendant. He's not different from an Anglo. He's not different from a French. They are the same people. So, African-American brothers and sisters, don't fight with any of the demographic. Just be intentional and strategic. The reason why I support African-Americans to do this, because African-Americans, whether we like it or not, some of my continental African followers might not like don't like when I say this, but it's a fact. African-Americans are the most consequential group of black folk in the world today. For the simple fact that African Americans are birthed out of the struggles, sweat, tears, and blood for 406 years. And they have successfully created a culture in proximity to constant and perpetual hostility, and still made that culture one of the most powerful black culture that has permeated the world in its entirety. And African Americans are a demographic of black people who live in proximity to the biggest economy on the planet. That said, African Americans have access to a certain level of capital that can generate a powerful economic infusion into the global African Commonwealth that no other group of Africans around the world can match it. Follow me, continental Africans. Follow me. Don't hate. Just follow what I'm saying. The African American GDP stands today at $2 trillion. Trillion with a T. The African American GDP stands at $2 trillion. The entire continent of Africa is the richest continent in the world. But in terms of liquidity, cash, right? Because you have to turn the natural resources in cash. The African continental GDP is probably $2 or $3 trillion. So imagine for 1 second that African Americans, they start to recycle $2 trillion of dollars, $2 trillion of their GDP into global infrastructure investment like what the Chinese are doing, specifically in Africa. African Americans have the potential to become the richest people in America using African natural resources. I've just given an example how African Americans can move and create a population growth in a couple of states and take over the political helm of those states and create state sovereign funds. And those state sovereign funds can borrow money to African American business people who can create companies, manufacturing companies that use African natural resources to manufacture products in America with African natural resources, and in turn build subsidiaries of those companies in Africa to export and sell across the continent now that we have AFTA. So African American companies can be in Africa and be in America and take over the continental African market and take over the continental North and South and Central American market in certain products like electric car batteries, like rubber for tires. Most vehicles, you need rubber. Without rubber, you cannot build machines. These are some of the ways to go. These are some of the ways we can solve this problem once and for all. So if African Americans say, we want to stand back, you don't just stand back and stay in your house. You stand back with calculation and strategy. If you say, we're tired, we don't want to vote, you have to do strategy, which means you have to move and create political majoritarian communities. So when these Latinos are coming, like what happened in Maryland, like Langley Park and all these places, don't allow them in your community, because Latinos, they come to African American communities like in Baltimore, East Baltimore, and different places. You know what they do? When they become majority in African American communities, they start electing their own to represent the community. That is how a lot of African Americans have lost county, state, and congressional seats all across the country. So African Americans don't police their communities. So other people come from different parts of the world who don't have their African American interests at heart. They come into African American communities and they start voting against the African Americans until they vote the African Americans out of power. It's politics 101. It's not hate. This is not hate. This is not xenophobia. It's politics 101. You don't allow other group of people who don't have your political best interests to move into your community and vote you out of power. You did? And because the mistake that a lot of African Americans are making, they live in in communities where they are minority. If you are minority, you can never win. Your enemies will keep voting you out. Let me give an example, Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., back in them days, when I was a young boy, Washington, D.C. used to be chocolate city, right? For all the old heads who know Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. used to be chocolate city. Today, Washington, D.C. is not chocolate city. And ever since Washington, D.C. was chocolate city, from Mayor Washington in the late 70s to 80, right? I start naming them. Mayor Washington was African American. That's from the 70s to the 80s. After Mayor Washington, you had Mayor Myron J. Barry, African American again, right? African American again. Was set up, and you all know the story for you you all in DC. Shout out to my main man, Mike Wells, Barry Farms, Southeast Washington, DC, Bobby Deal, Pomeroy Terrace, Nick, Clifton Terrace, 14th Street, Washington Heights. Those are my road dogs. So after Mayor Barry, the city was taken over by Congress, and they named after Mayor Barry, you had Mayor Sharon Pratt Kelly, African-American lady again, right? So all the mayors from Mayor Washington to today, Mayor Bowser, has been African-Americans. Why? Because African-Americans maintain a population edge, majority in the city. And they elected these black mayors because these were qualified people to run the city. For those of you who don't know, DC has some of the highest per capita income in the United States. DC has some of the most educated black people anywhere in the world. DC has produced some of the brightest African Americans and some of the brightest black people in the world. You can go all the way back to Frederick Douglass, who live in DC. He's not from DC though, but he live in DC, Southeast. So what I'm trying to say here is, because African Americans successfully maintain their population majority in DC, they control their own political and economic destiny in the city. So think for 1 second now that DC has moved from Chocolate City, and DC now is officially becoming vanilla and mocha sprinkle. DC is no more Chocolate City. For all of you who know DC, DC right now is vanilla and mocha sprinkles. And as DC becomes more vanilla and mocha sprinkles, what do you think is going to happen in DC? I've already predicted the next mayor of DC might not be an African American, because DC is no more Chocolate City. DC is vanilla and mocha sprinkles. And it's fine, because America is a land of competition. America is a land of competition. So every demographic is fighting for themselves, right? You did? So I'm not knocking that. America is a land of competition, even though the playing field is not level for all Americans. Especially for African Americans, the playing field has never been leveled. That is why African Americans must find a way to build majority-centered communities, cities, counties, and states where they can have, where they can take control of their economic, political future. So you as an African American, you don't have no business being in South Dakota, except you are a snow bunny hopping. You as an African American, you don't have no business being in Vermont or in New Hampshire. Pack your bags, go to Delaware, go to Maryland, go to Virginia, Northern Virginia, go to Georgia, go to South Carolina, North Carolina, Mississippi, so we can become majority. Majority. Do you ever think an African American can ever become governor of Wyoming? Do you ever think an African American can become governor of North Dakota or South Dakota? It's not going to happen because the majority of North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, they are European Americans, and they're not going to vote for you as an African American to become their leader, except you are a useful political idiot for them. They will vote for you, but you are not working for the interest of the minority groups. You are working for them. We all people like Latinos who don't have the interests of African Americans in mind to come to African American communities, and in 10 years they become majority and vote African Americans out of power, or join with European Americans to vote African Americans out of power. You understand? This is what is going on. As we speak today, do you all know they are trying to do that in South Africa? In Cape Town, they are the DA, which is a political party that was started by one political opposition when Mandela was there, Helen Zille, Democratic Alliance, is mostly a white people political party in South Africa, and they are in charge of home affairs, right? So what they do is they are trying to encourage a lot of white people to come to Cape Town so they can take over power and make Cape Town a new country which is controlled by white people inside Africa as we speak today. But they are coming to the realization that Africans not gonna tolerate that nonsense. Like African countries came together to fight apartheid and successfully defeated apartheid. Africans not gonna tolerate it. It might end up in a bloody war in the southern part of the continent. But America is an open country that settlers, colonial settlers, descendants of slaves, and the natives compete politically and economically in, right? So people should fight for their interests and don't depend on the support of another demographic, because the fact still is African Americans are the most hated group in America. And if you know that, why are you expecting the other people who are practicing racism against you to vote with you to give you power? You gotta be a damn fool. You gotta be a fool. So it is what it is. Yeah, the power went up. There's light out there though. No, the light.